The Senate will come to order. Mr. Carpenter, please call the roll.
Senators Bridges, Cook, Quorum, Court, Crowder, Danielson, Donovan, Finberg, Fields, Foote, Gardner, Janal, Gonzalez, Hill,
Excused.
Heisey, Holbert, Lee, Lundeen, Marble, Moreno, Pedersen, Priola, Rankin, Rodriguez, Scott, Smallwood, Sonnenberg, Story, Tate, Todd, Williams, Winter, Woodward, Zenzinger. Mr. President.
Here. With 34 present, 0 absent, 1 excused, we have a quorum. Senator Winter, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Mr. President. Guests and members, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the Journal. Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the reading of the Journal of Friday, February 22nd, 2019 be dispensed with and that the Journal be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Senate Services.
Correctly revised, House Bill 1012, 1020, 1033, and 1034.
Introduction resolutions.
House Joint Resolution 1011 by Representative St. Neville and Senator Marble concerning honoring Gold Star families.
Third reading of bills, consent calendar. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Joint Resolution 1011 to lay over 1 day under the rules.
You've heard the motion. House Joint Resolution 1011 will be laid over 1 day under the rules. Third reading of bills, consent calendar. Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the titles to all the bills on the consent calendar?
House Bill 1012 by Representatives Beckman of Valdez and Senator Fields concerning the flexibility of the Department of Personnel to administer the payment and controlled maintenance projects from the proceeds of lease purchase agreements executed pursuant to Senate Bill 17267. House Bill 1020 by Representatives Robertson, Beckman, and Senators Fields and Story concerning the clarification of certain administrative matters of the Capital Development Committee.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the passage of all the bills on the third reading of bills consent calendar, which includes House Bill 1012 and House Bill 1020.
Is there any discussion on any of the bills? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of all the bills on the third reading consent calendar. Are there any no votes on any of the bills on the third reading consent calendar? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, House Bill 1012 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Crowder, Moreno. With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, House Bill 1020 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senator Moreno. Third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to House Bill 1033.
House Bill 1033 by Representatives Tipper and Kennedy and Senators Fields and Priola concerning local government's authority to regulate products containing nicotine.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1033 on third reading with a favorable recommendation.
Is there any discussion on House Bill 1033? Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, colleagues, I wanted to come down and speak about my vote on this bill. The bill is entitled, as you know, Concerning a Local Government's Authority to Regulate Products Containing Nicotine. We're talking about vaping. And I believe this is a practice and a product that should be closely regulated. Closely regulated because nicotine is a dangerous substance. And in fact, I would be inclined to look at a bill that would regulate this as a matter of statewide concern, deal with the taxation of it as a matter of statewide concern. I have heard the senator from Arapahoe County talk about all of the dangers, and I understand and agree with those. But it is a puzzle to me, a conundrum, if you will, that if these products are as dangerous as the senator from Arapahoe County says, that we don't simply, as a General Assembly, step up and deal with them in a uniform way across the state. What this bill does is chooses to treat them in a patchwork manner and to create different taxation. We're going to create trafficking, if you will. That's a terrible word, but that's what we're going to do, because in some jurisdictions, 18-year-olds will be able to buy these products, and in a mile over or maybe just across the street, they won't be able to buy them. So they'll be crossing the street. Those of you who are parents know that kids are a lot of things, but they ain't stupid. They can figure this out. This is not the right approach. It is well intended, but it is not the right approach. And for that reason, I am going to be a no vote, not because I approve of 18-year-olds vaping, not because I don't think we ought to regulate it, but it is a puzzle to me why, if we feel like it should be regulated, and it is important to do so, that we not say, well, there ought to be a standard for Ouray County and a different standard for El Paso County and a different standard for Pueblo County and a different standard for Denver County. It is a matter of statewide concern, and we ought to treat it as such. This is the wrong approach to deal with a serious problem, and I will be a no vote.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is the right approach because we're talking about kids. And we know that once children in middle school get access to cigarettes, e-cigarettes, and they start vaping, it causes health issues for them. This is about Colorado kids. It's about protecting the lives of Colorado kids. This bill is about local control because local control communities understand what they need to do to protect and serve their communities. So it's up to them to decide if they want to increase taxes. This is not a mandate. It gives local communities the opportunity to increase taxes on tobacco and nicotine products if they choose to. And as a body, we're saying to these local communities, do what you think you need to do that's best to curb the trend as relates to teens not smoking. That's who we are protecting, and that's who I'm serving. This is a big issue in our schools today. Kids are vaping, and it is harmful. And so, members, I urge a yes vote on House Bill 1033.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1033? Seeing none, the motion before the body is a passage of House Bill 1033. Are there any no votes? Senators Crowder, the minority leader, Marble, Coram, Cook, Lundin, Heisey, Woodward, Smallwood, Sonnenberg, Gardner, Rankin, Scott. With a vote of 21 ayes, 13 no votes, 0 absent, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1033 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senator Gonzalez, Court, Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to House Bill 1034.
House Bill 1034 by Representative Sullivan and Esquire and Senator Danielson concerning a requirement that the common carrier engaged in the transportation of property by road have at least 2 crew members aboard a freight train while the freight train is moving.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1034 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any discussion? Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this weekend I had an opportunity to have a couple more discussions with some of those short line railroads that we tried to exempt through an amendment. Short line railroads that haul agricultural products primarily on the Eastern Plains and the San Luis Valley. Members, you said this was about safety. We have a proven track record that these short line railroads do not have safety issues. But I'm going to read you a little bit of what the Federal Railroad Administration recently stated. And I quote, "We cannot provide reliable or conclusive statistical data to suggest whether one-person crew operations are generally safer or less safe than multi-person crew operations." They went on to say, "Based on our limited experience in this and other modes, we don't find that two-person train crews offer a safety benefit." Let's assume they're wrong. Let's assume they're wrong and that the large trains, the 3-mile trains that were talked about last week, need 2 people. Great. 3-car trains, 10-car trains, short line trains that are traveling from the elevator in Holyoke to the elevator in Amherst so that they can load one of those big unit trains that have a vehicle that follows them in case they have to leave the engine, now would have to have 2 people on that train. Members, it becomes frustrating for those of us in rural Colorado when we run bills to appease a constituency that has a one-size-fits-all that then does everything it can to destroy an economy in rural Colorado. What will happen on these railroads on the Eastern Plains, and there's 3 of them. The NKCR Railroad, which is in northeast Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado Railroad, will just quit working in Colorado because they don't have the same regulations in Nebraska and Kansas. They can still do the business the way they need to. The Kyle Railroad in the middle of the state of Colorado does the same thing. It's Kansas to Colorado. Then we got the Victoria Southern and Towner Railroad in southern Colorado, and my good friends from Alamosa Senate District, and he has another one in the San Luis Rio Grande. Now, San Luis Rio Grande, that's all in one state. They would have to make that adjustment. They would make that adjustment. But those others operating in other states are telling me it wouldn't be worth it. It's not worth it to pay another guy just to go into Colorado. Members, you wouldn't take the logical fix. I ask for you to vote no on this bill now.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's always important to share both sides of issues in this chamber, particularly when we get to thirds, because on seconds it was a little bit one-sided as the impacts of rural Colorado in this. I too represent rural Colorado, 7 counties that hug the Continental Divide and the central part of the state. And I have many trains in my district. They haul people, they haul coal, they haul produce and products. And I received 0 calls or emails of concerns on this bill. So just would like to express that this weekend I too reached out and could not find the same level of concern in the part of rural Colorado that I represent. Thank you, Mr. President. Ask for an aye vote.
Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too did not receive any calls. The reason I didn't receive any calls, I don't have a railroad in my district that is affected. I don't think there is one west of the Continental Divide that is affected. So we're talking about these small, short line rail lines on the Eastern Plains and the San Luis Valley. Those are affected, and they will be affected. So what you're going to see, you're going to get something you probably don't want. You're going to see a whole lot of trucks running down the road. You're going to see trucks. You're not going to see rail line. The rail line will be a rusted pile of weeds. But those highways that are so underfunded now will take a great beating because those trains will probably no longer run, and we will have a safety issue because we will have trucks on the highway. It's very, very dangerous. I personally don't like to be in the San Luis Valley in the fall when they're harvesting potatoes. There's so many trucks out there, and you're going to add a great deal to that already. It is a matter of safety. I ask for a no vote on this bill.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick comment. I did hear for some railroads, and you know, one interesting thing they told me was they did reach out to a lot of different legislators, but they did not return their call. They did not answer the request. So to say that the same level of interest in other districts is the same is just not accurate. You have to communicate with these people to find out exactly what they're saying. So I just want to rebut that one issue, but I do think that this will, you know, for those who claim to support rural Colorado, this bill particularly hurts rural Colorado. So I think, you know, I would ask you to join with the rest of us to vote no on this. Thank you.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. One thing about railroads, and I guess it's why it's of consequence, is once the railroad's gone, it's gone. And you're basically at that point saying you're kind of abandoning the town to a certain mode of industry, and they will not be able to go back to where they once were. And I don't want to see short line railroads closed, and that's why I'll be voting no today. Thank you.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, one thing I learned studying economics at the University of Colorado is when you put mandates on certain industries with good intentions that increase costs of employment, employers will find creative ways to go another direction, so on and so forth. And what brought this to mind was Senator Tate's discussion, and I want to posit something that I think about every time I walk into a certain restaurant I won't name by name, but a discussion we had over in the House on a certain other piece of legislation that was trying to artificially raise the cost of employment for that industry. Now you can go into this restaurant and use touchscreens to order where you used to speak with a person. So I surmise that this bill, although its intention is to encourage employment for possibly another 60 folks in the rail industry, will actually have the opposite effect, and the folks who own those rail lines will either figure out a way through federal legislation to have them autonomous like vehicles are moving, or they'll simply shut down and move out of the state. So just want to posit that thought as we vote on this bill.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to this bill as well and would urge you all to think carefully about this quiet, little, narrow bill and the effect it has. I feel a little bit like Rip Van Winkle with regard to this. It seems to me that we've taken a nap and 20 years later we wake up and we're pining for the protection of very, very narrow special interests and turning our back on the fact that technology has moved us forward in significant and important ways. And technology gives hope for places like rural Colorado. It makes the economy and the economic opportunity for businesses and people to grow and expand and keep the ethos, the elements that are what our rural communities once were and hope to be in the future, alive and vibrant. This particular bill reaches backwards and ignores the fact that there are better ways of doing it than we used to do back in the late 1800s, that in fact technology provides safety and security in ways that didn't perhaps exist then, and that narrow special interests who would seek legislative protection, in fact, are disruptive and damaging to the hope of places like rural Colorado. So I urge your opposition, but no, I misspoke. I said I feel a little bit like Rip Van Winkle. The reality is Rip Van Winkle fell asleep and 20 years later woke up to see a different world. Almost 40 years ago, as a college student, I heard this very debate before the chamber of the unicameral in Nebraska. 40 years ago, they were saying, golly, technology versus feather bedding. And they answered that question. And they answered that question on behalf of the people of the rural communities of Nebraska. And they said, we will use technology. We will use forward-thinking ideas in order to preserve our rural way of life. This bill does violence to that idea, to that ethos, to our rural communities. For that reason, a big reason, affected by a very small and narrow bill, I urge your opposition to 1034. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any further discussion? Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, this bill's about lemonade stands. I always have to have a hook, Mr. President, to catch the attention of my colleague from Denver. Why is this about lemonade stands? Well, recall that we have had this discussion about excessive regulation over and over and over again in this chamber. During the 71st General Assembly, I remember having a discussion about driverless vehicles with some of the same interests. Trying to prohibit the use of automated vehicles. And in this assembly, we talked about excessive regulation on a bill about minors' businesses. Now, last week, my friend and colleague from Sterling came down and offered a reasonable amendment to exempt rural railroads, as I understand 3 of them. And no, I didn't get calls from this either because I don't have any of these operating in my district, but I was sent here by constituents that told me over and over again, we are subject to excessive regulation, which makes it difficult for us to do business. And Senator Gardner, they even call me Bob at home. Bob, every time you have an opportunity to vote against an excessive regulation, I want you to do it. So, no, I didn't get any phone calls about this, but I've had phone call after phone call. So a reasonable amendment was offered and rejected. And it reminded me of that legislative declaration in our bill about minors' businesses. That phrase, in the absence of common sense relief. The amendment offered was common sense relief for small businesses in Colorado, and it was rejected. And so those of us who would support reasonable regulation cannot, in good conscience, vote for this bill because there's an absence of common sense relief for small businesses and the use of technology, as my colleague from Colorado Springs has said. I knew when I read the legislative declaration about minors' businesses that I would see over and over and over again an absence of common sense relief in the regulatory structures and regimes that come before this body. And my constituents have asked me to vote no on bills that lack common sense relief. I'll be a no vote.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Marble.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. What we do in this chamber and Under the Dome echoes a harsh reality to a lot of people who I'm sure we don't intend to hurt. But this will do irreparable damage to those who cannot regain a business lost. The two rail lines that we're talking about operate so differently. They're managed differently. And that's what we need to consider when we pass just laws. Small businesses throughout the state are having a pretty tough time. But these rail lines, when they close, it's true, they won't come back. And that's the reality that's going to be echoed if this passes. That we, as a legislature, can't decipher the difference between businesses and put harsh regulation on those who don't deserve it, knowing that they'll close and it will do irreparable harm to those areas that they serve. Think about this when you vote. These are two different purposes, two different managements of rail lines. And this is an unjust mandate that we're putting on these small lines, and they'll never recover.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. A reasonable amendment was rejected. We were told that the amendment was unnecessary, that the small businesses, the short rail lines that we had referenced on second reading were already exempt, and apparently they are exempt if they put an unnecessary pieces of equipment at the end of the train, a caboose, and so long as they don't exceed 30 miles an hour. That amendment would have allowed clear exemption for those companies to not have to put an unnecessary piece of equipment. Now, I'm not an expert in rail, but I think a caboose is used for sleeping quarters and meals. And if you're moving potatoes from one town to the next in a short line, you probably don't need that, and you don't need the added expense of fuel, energy to move that unnecessary piece of equipment along with all of those potatoes. So we have a bill that will make potatoes more expensive, I suppose, and if those short rail lines want to be exempt, they will not exceed the extraordinary speed of 30 miles an hour, have an unnecessary piece of equipment there, or they'll go out of business. And that's what we were trying to avoid with that reasonable amendment. That amendment was defeated. So now we have a piece of legislation that may appropriately require long-haul trains to have at least 2 people on that train. But for those small businesses that operate in Colorado, they apparently now have a choice. Buy an unnecessary piece of equipment, drag it along with their load from one town to the next, and don't exceed 30 miles an hour. Why? That is unreasonable. There is no why, other than insensitivity to those small businesses in rural Colorado. I ask for a no vote.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1034? Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think a lot of the misunderstanding around the bill could have been solved if some of my colleagues would have paid attention or listened to the committee testimony that folks came to visit with us about For example, the engineers and the conductors that explained that by the time they got off of the locomotive to check what had happened to the train, not 10 cars down the line, they were stopped by the first responders, the Colorado firefighters, who needed to speak to them about the hazardous materials or the injuries that may have been sustained as a result of some derailment or wreck or whatever they were testifying to. They were pleading with us to listen to their needs as the people who conduct these trains all over the state. It's not as though the trains don't move through rural Colorado every day. The first responders themselves who came to plead with us to pass this measure to improve and ensure a basic standard of safety, that they needed this so that they could provide the service that's expected of them to the citizens out in the world. First responders came to plead with us to say, please pass this bill so that we can provide the service to the citizens that they expect of us. We need this. They might also know that actually short line train is just a term, slang, has nothing to do with the length of the train. It has to do with the amount of revenue that they pull in each year. And with all due respect to the railroads who also came to tell us that, by the way, they already do this because they care about safety too. So to exempt, as my colleague said earlier, rural railroads will not be an acceptable or common sense alternative to what we proposed in the bill. In fact, the reason that it was not common sense or acceptable is because something like that has been used in states where this has passed, and the railroads use it as a huge loophole, making the safety requirements of this basic legislation unenforceable. That is why we needed to vote that amendment down. Few of these are even small businesses. They're owned by large holding companies, et cetera. I assume the railroad lines that my colleagues are referencing, even though, like I said, they're not characterized that way by their length of the train. Most of them do move under 30 miles per hour, and if they need to accommodate this regulation, it means that they should, so that we can hold these folks to the basic level of safety that they say they're already providing to the communities that they move through. So again, back to the committee testimony that we all heard, when it comes to the environmental impact that was referenced by one of my good colleagues, rest assured that the folks that came to testify, their investment in the community, in the environmental benefit of this bill, including Conservation Colorado, did so because they want to rely more on trains to transport goods and lessen the burden on our roads and highways. So the environmental impact, the service to the first responders when it comes to injuries, even deaths, but also the hazardous materials that we transport on these trains every single day, and the basic level of safety that our conductors and engineers demand we provide them, that is this bill. And for all those reasons, I urge an aye vote on House Bill 1034. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion before the body is the passage of House Bill 1034. Are there any no votes? Minority Leader, Senators Marble, Quorum, Sonnenberg, Heisey, Crowder, Cook, Priola, Lundin, Woodward, Smallwood, Gardner, Rankin, Tate, Scott. With a vote of 19 ayes, 15 noes, 0 absent, 1 excuse, House Bill 1034 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Winter, Rodriguez, Story, Majority Leader, Janal, Todd, Pedersen, Fields, Bridges. Please add the president. General orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of general orders consent calendar.
The motion is for the committee. You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is adopted, and the Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of general orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Danielson will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. The court rule is relaxed. Mr. Carpenter, please read the titles to all the bills on the general orders, second reading of bills consent calendar.
House Bill 1109 by Representatives Hooten and Larson and Senators Pedersen and Tate, concerning, in addition to the definition of other outlet, to enable a licensed convalescent center to operate a pharmacy for the benefit of patients being treated in the convalescent center. House Bill 1077 by Representative Robertson, Senators Tate and Pedersen, concerning an authorization for a pharmacist to dispense a chronic maintenance drug to a patient without a current prescription in limited circumstances. House Bill 1070 by Representative Arndt, Senator Tate, concerning the repeal of statutory provisions requiring the Department of Public Health and Environment to test substances that are purported to have value in the treatment of cancer. House Bill 1136 by Representative Kraft, Tharp, Stain, and Senators Smallwood and Todd, concerning access by the Office of the State Auditor to records necessary to conduct 4 statutorily authorized audits in connection with entities that are not state agencies. House Bill 1066 by Representative Benteo and Kip and Senator Foote, concerning counting a student who is enrolled in special education services and the graduation rate in the school year in which the student completes the minimum graduation requirements.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move for the adoption of all the bills on the consent calendar and their associated committee reports, which includes House Bill 1109, House Bill 1077, along with the Health and Human Services Committee report, House Bill 1070, House Bill 1136, and House Bill 1066.
Is there any discussion on any of the committee reports? The motion before the adoption is the body of all the reports to all the bills on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The reports are adopted. Mr. Majority Leader, is there any discussion of any of the bills on the consent calendar? Seeing none, the motion before us is the adoption of all of the bills on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the bills are adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion for the committee is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Mr. Carpenter, please read the report.
Senator Danielson, I'm going to retract that just for a second. The Senate will stand in a brief recess while we work through some of these IT issues. Senate will come back to order. Senator Danielson, if you wouldn't mind renewing your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Mr. Carpenter, now will you please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee will place the reports that are under consideration of the following test bills, being saving thereof, makes following recommendation: 1, House Bill 1109, House Bill 1077 is amended, House Bill 1070, House Bill 1136, House Bill 1066, passed on second read, order revised and placed on the calendar for the reading and final passage.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
The motion is for the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, the committee of the whole report is adopted. House Bill 1109, House Bill 1077 as amended, House Bill 1070, House Bill 1136, House Bill 1066, passed on second reading in order revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. General order, second reading of bills. Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the committee of whole for the consideration of general orders, second reading of bills.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is adopted, and the Senate will resolve itself into the committee of the whole for consideration of general order, second reading of bills, and Senator Danielson will take the chair.
You should. You gotta come up here. You should do that just as soon as I start, just to mess with it. I bet we could get a big boo.
The committee will come to order, and the court rule is relaxed. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to Senate Bill 90.
Senate Bill 90 by Senator Scott and Representative Gray concerning the operation of peer-to-peer motor vehicle sharing businesses.
Senator Scott.
Ooh. Thank you, Madam Chair. I know I deserve that. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 90 and the accompanying committee report.
To the committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee met. We had several amendments to improve the bill for some insurance issues, and it came out of committee favorably.
Is there any further discussion on the adoption of the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the committee report. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. To the bill. Senator Scott, there's also an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L011.
Amendment L011, Senate Bill 90 by
Senator Scott. To the amendment. Oh. Is there any further discussion on Amendment L011? Senator Scott.
We take a senatorial 5, please.
We will stand in senatorial 5. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I withdraw L011 for now.
Senator Scott, there's another amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L020.
Amendment L020, Senate Bill 90 by Senator Scott.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. L020 is an amendment. Oh, I'm sorry. I move L020.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment basically does something that's probably very important because we are running a public safety bill here. What this amendment does is basically says that anybody that participates in sharing their vehicle has got to provide the traction control devices that are required by state law from September 1st to May 31st. And they must provide them with the vehicle so that the person using the vehicle doesn't get stuck up in our beautiful mountains.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L020? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L020. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L020 is adopted. There's another amendment on the desk. Senator Scott.
I move L01. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L014.
Amendment L014 Senate Bill 90.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L014.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This language was requested by General Motors to clarify how the bill impacts one of the car-sharing platforms known as Maven in their car-sharing program. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L014? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L014. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L014 is adopted. Senator Scott, there's another amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L016.
Amendment L016 Senate Bill 90 by Senator Scott.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L016.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L016? Senator Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is language negotiated with the Colorado Trial Lawyers Association and the insurance industry to clarify some things on the limits, insurance limits, minimum insurance limits on the bill.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L016? Senator Sonnenberg. Senator Scott. Seeing none, the question, Senator Scott. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, did you move it?
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as I look at this amendment, it appears to me that we are, help me understand, that we are increasing the insurance requirements to participate in this program. Is that what I'm understanding here?
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, what we are doing is changing it just for that particular use when somebody has that vehicle in use, but not for other, not full-time, I should say.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm curious as to why we would do this, why we would force a commercial liability policy that is not less than 3 times the minimum amount of financial responsibility. Now I see why it came from the trial lawyers. Business is booming. Ask for a no vote.
Further discussion on Amendment L016? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L016. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Senator Scott, there's another amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title. Please read Amendment L018.
Amendment L018 Senate Bill 90 by
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, we are dealing with some insurance requirements that were requested by the insurance companies and also the authors of the bill to bring themselves more in line with what the insurers, carriers, and what their lines of insurance require. I ask for an aye vote.
Could you please move the amendment, Senator Scott?
I'm sorry. I move L018.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L018? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L018. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. To the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess first of all, you have another? You have another one? Okay.
Senator Scott, there is
another amendment.
Would it take Senatorial 5? Okay, Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L011.
Amendment L011 is the bill by Senator Sonnenberg.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L011. Madam Chair, what this amendment does is says, look, if we're going to have peer-to-peer, which I actually think is a good idea, if someone wants to do business and rent their car to somebody else, we truly ought to level the playing field. So what this does is deregulate the car rental industry and puts them all on the same page. No longer would they have to do all of the things that they need to do required by law and regulation. They can do the same thing that we're doing on the peer-to-peer. If you truly want to stimulate competition, if you want to have these options, I ask for an aye vote on L011 so everybody truly is playing on the same field.
Senator Court.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I request a title ruling on this amendment.
The Senate will stand in Senatorial 5. Thank you. The chair rules that Amendment L011 does not fit under the title to the bill. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it, all the effort everybody's put into this bill. And I will apologize for the amount of hysteria that this bill has caused in some circles. But I think it's important that we talk about a little bit, because I know we want to get through this. What is car sharing, and what's this all about, and what's the hysteria level that we've heard outside this chamber? I'm sure that we've all heard the terminology shared mobility. It's not something new. It's been around since 2012. Right now, 1.7 million car sharing members are in 27 countries. Of these, 800,000 car sharing members are just in the United States, almost a million. So it's nothing new. This reminds me a lot of the days of the Uber wars that some of us were here for. Airbnb, VRBO. We didn't see Hilton Corporation run down here and start screaming about VRBOs and Airbnbs. In this particular case, we had one company, and I get it. They don't really want any competition. I understand that. And they also want to be in this particular space of car sharing. Now, on your desks, I made a little copy of this for you, because we were all told that this is about rental car companies. Tomato, tomato. My colleague prefers tomato. It's all what's going on within this world of mobility. And I think it's going to expand. I think there'll be days when somebody can fly into Colorado to go to a Rockies game, and they'll be able to request things that they want in the vehicle, and they'll pay for those things along with the vehicle. They'll go to a Rockies game and go home. They may go camping. There might be a whole lot of things that'll spin off of this. Right now, you can rent an RV. You can do a boat. You can do a four-wheeler. There's a dozen different things that you can do out there. So it's really nothing new. It's just what happens in this building. I think we're going to see these things come a little bit more often as we move forward. And I do remember the Uber wars. That was quite the show. Somebody had to show me what Uber was. There's been a lot of discussion about fairness. There's been a lot of discussion about parity. And I would challenge you to take your next rental car agreement, which I happen to have mine here, and look at all the different things that you pay that a typical rental car company doesn't pay. You pay for their license plates for that vehicle. You pay for the ownership tax for that vehicle. You pretty much pay for anything they want you to pay for within that rental agreement. A rental agreement is kind of like a mortgage. Who read theirs other than Senator from Douglas County? That's pretty much what it's all about. I understand that they don't want competition. I get that. But we've had lots of competition, a lot of arenas around the world, and the world's not going to come to an end. It didn't come to an end with Uber. Oh, that's right. It did not come to an end with VRBOs. It did not come to an end with Airbnbs. It hasn't come to an end with multiple levels of sharing and things that we have to get used to in this new universe. With that, I thank you very much for your time, members. And again, I apologize for some of the hysteria-driven discussion that's happened outside these doors, and I ask for your aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 90? Senator Sonnenberg.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and now I'm conflicted. We added more regulation to this bill in an attempt to create more competition, and that worries me. I like the idea of peer-to-peer rentals, quite frankly. But I hate the idea that we just put more regulation on peer-to-peer rentals to try and so-called level the playing field, yet it is far from level. From my perspective, we had a shot without the additional liability requirements, which will stymie this industry, and the other things that we put on the bill. At least I got 24 hours to try and sort through it to see if the pros beat the cons, but right now it looks like I'm going to have to be a no on the bill, just simply because we added all of this regulation and these requirements to create competition. Doesn't make sense to me. Right now, I'm a no.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 90? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 90. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 90 is adopted. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of Senate Bill 88.
Senate Bill 88 by Senator Gardner and Representative Tipper concerning the adoption of the revised Uniform Unclaimed Property Act.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 88 layover until Wednesday, February 27th, 2019.
The question before us is to lay over Senate Bill 88 at the request of the Majority Leader. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 88 will be laid over at the Majority Leader's request. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion before the committee is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The very loud ayes have it, and the committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Mr. Carpenter, will you please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee holds the reports that are introduced and final test bills being secondly read makes following recommendation on Senate Bill 90 as amended passed second read order and gross place account for their bringing final passage Senate Bill 88 laid over until 2/27/19 or attending its place on the calendar.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
The motion is for the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excuse, committee of the whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 090 as amended passed on second reading and ordered engrossed placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 088 laid over until 2/27/2019 and retaining its place on the calendar. Consideration of House amendments to Senate bills. Majority Leader Fenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar until Tuesday, February 26th, 2019.
You have heard the motion. The motion is to lay over the balance of the calendar. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The remainder of the balance of the calendar will be laid over and under the rules. Announcements. Senator Pedersen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we are going to be having a mental health or behavioral health caucus starting this Wednesday. It's going to be every month, and lunch will be provided for legislators. This week, we're going to be discussing the impact on families caring for a child or youth with a serious mental health challenge, hearing the impact directly from parents in Colorado, and texting resources for teens, and we would love to have you there.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. President. So members, look for this well put together flyer on your desk for further information. Hope to see you there.
Senator Pedersen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And another announcement, tomorrow is the legislative breakfast for Colorado Wins. It's a great opportunity to hear why unions help build a better Colorado. It's at 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, Tuesday, February 26th, and it's going to be in the basement. We look forward to seeing you there.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee, we have one bill up today at 1:30. We will hear Senate Bill 19-135 in room 354. Thank you.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Judiciary Committee, attention Judiciary Committee, we are taking Senate Bill 136 off the calendar for today, so we'll have an expedited docket. It'll show up again on Wednesday. Thank you.
Will the Capitol Choir please convene, and will the sergeants help escort Senator Story to the well, as her birthday is yesterday, so.
We need more male voices here.
I don't know what that means.
Nice, deep
Sounds sexy.
baritone. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Are you guys ready?
We're ready.
Give us a pitch.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Senator Story. Happy birthday to you. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for giving us a pitch.
Senator Danielson. Any further announcements? Further announcements? Seeing none, Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a sad announcement today, colleagues. A dear friend and advocate for the rights of the disabled, for the rights of LGBTQ people, and specifically the rights of disabled parents, passed away over the weekend. And so I wanted to highlight just briefly the incredible work and amazing, outstanding, wonderful life of Carrie Ann Lucas, who is the executive director of Disabled Parents' Rights and had worked in a number of capacities in the community to promote the rights of those who are disabled or seeking parental rights or anything in this realm. It was my privilege to work with her quite closely on a bill last year. I have my button on today. House Bill 1104, parental rights for people with disabilities, and we passed a measure, to make sure that her life's work is not forgotten. You have my pledge to continue to work hard on the issues that matter the most to her. And we are at a real loss today without this person in the building and out in the community every day fighting for those who need it the most. I was extraordinarily privileged to be able to even work near her, let alone to partner on such an important piece of legislation. And so it is with enormous sadness and the utmost respect that I would like to, before my colleagues also add their thoughts, observe a moment of silence for the life of Carrie Ann Lucas.
The Senate will observe a moment of silence and the chimes will be rung.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues and guests in the gallery.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
What a profound loss for our community. Carrie Ann Lucas's reputation preceded her. And by the time I was honored enough to meet her, I was already in awe of everything that she had done for community and her relentless advocacy. Right after she was involved in the sit-in of Senator Cory Gardner's office, she had to instruct the policemen who were arresting her on how to operate her wheelchair so that they could arrest her correctly. She then waited outside the Denver County Jail for hours, overnight almost, to ensure that her fellow advocates from ADOPT were also released. Carrie Ann Lucas is a testament to doing everything that you can with what you got. And what a profound loss for Colorado and for our community. I want to take a moment to acknowledge her 4 children, her parents, her sister, her brother, her niece and nephews, and to everyone from the Colorado Cross Disabilities Coalition, as well as from ADOPT. We are all in solidarity and we all feel your loss. Thank you.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
I just want to take a moment to talk about my dear friend Carrie Ann Lucas and what a loss it is this weekend. She was a fierce advocate in every moment of her life, whether it was in the courtroom as an attorney, it was testifying here at the Capitol, it was running for city council, and being an amazing mom. She taught, she protested, she litigated, she wrote, and she advocated. But most importantly, every action she took, she did with love. Rest in power, Carrie Ann Lucas.
Message from the House.
Thus is passed on third reading and transmitted to the Rise Statutes House Bill 1173. Thus passed on third reading and transmitted to the Rise Statutes House Bill 1031, 1038. Amendments printed in the House Journal February 22nd, 2019.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate recess until 2 p.m. today.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The Senate will stand in recess until 1400 today.